Joy Behar and AOC panic after Karoline said this on The View. Their painful reaction says it all. The red studio light blinked alive as the opening theme of Face Off roared through the room like a starter pistol. It was more than a debate. It was an ambush disguised as conversation broadcast live across the nation. Karoline Leavitt sat center stage, crisp navy blazer hair, tucked back posture, unmoved. The camera didn't need her to speak. Her stillness alone was language. She wasn't just the White House press secretary anymore. She was the front line of a political storm. Across from her, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez exhaled softly, her trademark calm already wound tight. Beside her sat Joy Behar, lips curled, microphone gripped like a dagger, cloaked in humor. They weren't hosts. Tonight, they were interrogators. "Let's not waste time," Behar said. "Director Patel's intel has Americans wondering who's truly safeguarding the nation. And with all due respect, Karoline, many of us wonder whether you were chosen for clarity or camera optics." Laughter, calculated and mean, spread through parts of the audience. Karoline didn't flinch. AOC seized the energy. "Here's the pattern," AOC began, voice measured. "This administration hides behind press podiums while letting federal agencies suppress dissent. When we question it, we get labeled extremist, socialist, dangerous." The host, Vanessa Hart, glanced across the table. Ms. Leavitt Karoline leaned slightly forward, voice firm, unhurried. "I was chosen to speak for the White House because I don't need a script to survive pressure. What I see on this stage isn't an oversight. It's performance. And not for the good of the people, but for applause." The audience stilled. She turned slightly toward Joy. "You can laugh. But mothers in border towns don't laugh when policies fail, they cry. And they called our offices, not yours." Joy raised a brow. "Border towns, please." That's a Fox News fantasy. The only thing this administration secured is a fear-based campaign slogan. Actually, Karoline countered, sliding a small paper stack forward. "It's the Department of Homeland Security's quarterly report signed by your own committee colleagues. Would you like the paragraph where it states that migrant-related violent crime dropped 38% after Operation Guardian Shield?" The room pulled back like a tide. AOC's lips pressed flat. "That data lacks context," she said quickly. "We're talking about systemic racism being framed as security." Karoline kept her voice even. "And I'm talking about facts being buried under slogans." A faint cheer broke from the crowd. Vanessa nodded, cueing the next question. "Congresswoman Patel's statement referenced FBI flags involving protests, including one you supported last fall. He claimed affiliations with groups seeking systemic upheaval. Can you confirm whether your office ever received communications from the Bureau?" AOC blinked. "Just once. A tell. No threats, no warnings. That's all political smog." Behar scoffed. "If this were the Nixon era, Patel would be forced to resign." And yet, Karoline cut in your team contacted his office hours before the segment aired to clarify portions of the classified draft. "I have the time-stamped communication." "Want to read it?" The studio gasped, not with outrage but realization. Karoline placed the printout gently on the table. No flourish, just certainty. Behar's humor vanished. AOC's posture tightened. "This is absurd," Behar began. "What's absurd," Karoline said, calm turning colder, "is demanding transparency only when you're not the one being scrutinized." AOC leaned in. "You think you're winning because you've memorized memos. This isn't about paper, it's about people." "I agree," Karoline said. "People who deserve leaders with integrity, not curated outrage." The audience didn't cheer, but they didn't laugh either. In the control room, a producer whispered to another, "The hashtag's live." "It's trending." She didn't win with shouting. She didn't need to. She brought documents, she brought names. She brought the moment to a place where performance collapsed under pressure. By the commercial break, the split screen was already viral, AOC frozen mid-response, Joy blinking in confusion, and Karoline's steady eyes forward. She hadn't even raised her voice. The second segment opened not with applause, but with pressure. Back from commercial, the camera panned wide, the host's voice steady as an anchor layered with intent cut through the silence. "We're back. Our focus now shifts to community safety and congressional leadership. Dallas, Queens, 2 American cities. both sounding alarm bells. And two figures here today, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and former White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, represent their respective visions for what accountability looks like. The lighting dimmed slightly, casting a velvet glow across the table. It was less spotlight, more interrogation lamp. AOC adjusted her mic. She knew this part was coming. Vanessa turned. Congresswoman crime in Queens has increased according to both federal and local reports. Residents have written directly to the FBI citing a collapse of local trust. What do you say to your constituents who no longer feel safe? AOC's face tightened. She inhaled slowly, then spoke. Safety isn't just about policing. It's about investment. It's about education, housing, youth programs. I've fought for all of those. But we are underfunded intentionally. This administration cuts aid and expects miracles. Karoline didn't interrupt. She let the words hang. Behar jumped in, shielding AOC with quick-fire sarcasm. If anyone should be questioned about safety, it's this administration who thinks arming kindergartens is policy and slashing social aid is reform. The crowd chuckled, but the laughter didn't land the same. Vanessa nodded toward Karoline. Your response? Karoline leaned forward, her tone the same as a prosecutor reading opening statements. Let's look at Queens. 3 shootings within 2 miles of a community center. AOC hosted a town hall. No action followed. People asked for help and they got hashtags. The silence prickled. AOC tilted her head, bracing. Karoline's voice didn't rise, but her words moved like a scalpel. Public safety isn't a trend. It's not a tweet. It's whether kids make it home from school. You call it underfunding. I call it consequences. And you don't get to blame Washington when your own district sends letters to federal agencies begging for oversight. A murmur rippled across the audience. This was no longer a debate, it was a deposition. AOC shot back, voice clipped. You want to talk community? Let's talk about the administration. You defend gutting after-school programs, turning housing vouchers into lottery tickets. You care about safety, then fund the future, not the military. Karoline didn't blink. She calmly laid a folder on the table. Funny you mention funding. She opened it with quiet finality pages sliding like sealed exhibits. This is the Congressional Budget Office's breakdown. Queens received a 22% increase in federal education grants under this administration. You praised it in a press release, until it became politically inconvenient. AOC opened her mouth, closed it. Karoline turned to Behar. As for arming kindergartens, no such proposal exists. But defunding local enforcement while crime rises, that's not a joke, it's abandonment. Behar scowled. You're spinning stats like a pro. I've been on air for 25 years and I can smell rehearsed outrage. I'm not outraged, Karoline said coolly. I'm informed. There's a difference. Vanessa glanced at the clock. Let's pivot to Dallas, Behar interjected before anyone else could. Ah yes, Crockett's territory, where funding vanished and police reform was code for confusion. Karoline didn't smile, but her voice carried a charge now. Dallas, my hometown, where my colleagues and I worked with city leaders to launch a community resilience grant, reduce repeat youth offenses by 19%, and fund vocational education with private-public partnerships. AOC crossed her arms. That's cherry picking. No, Karoline replied sharp. That's work, results. And while you were live streaming neighborhood walks, we were rebuilding them. The room exhaled. There was no dramatic gasp, just the slow recognition that something had shifted. Vanessa leaned in. Are you saying Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has failed her district? I'm saying Karoline replied that leadership is judged by outcomes, not retweets. The control room lit up. We're spiking. Twitter's exploding. Back on set, AOC tried to recover, let's be honest. None of this is about districts. It's about distraction. You're spinning achievements to hide deeper systemic rot. Karoline's response was soft. No, I'm showing that progress is possible when ideology gets out of the way. Vanessa's voice rang again. So to clarify, you believe the administration's approach has reduced crime? I believe Karoline said, eyes locked on the camera, that when facts are inconvenient, my opponents attack intent. But voters see more than passion. They see who delivers. No cheers, no applause, just awareness. Karoline hadn't shouted. She hadn't performed. She had methodically built a case. and the audience had absorbed it. During break, producers checked early YouTube comments. She's the first one who sounds like she actually reads the reports. I'm no Trump fan, but Karoline's got receipts. This isn't about parties. She just came prepared. Backstage, AOC swiped through her phone. Trending hashtags, support but also fracture. Some users quoted her, but more quoted Karoline. Outcomes, not retweets. Behar stormed toward her dressing room mic still hot. She's not press, she's PR with Google Sheets. But the internet had already crowned the round, and the debate was only halfway done. The final segment of the night was supposed to be about media, but by now it was about power. The lights returned a softer hue, flooding the stage. It was the kind of light used to ease tension, but it didn't work. The air remained taut. Words had cut deeper than expected. Faces had changed. And the audience could feel it. Vanessa Hart stood center stage now, her voice echoing with surgical control. In an age where information is weaponized, the media has become a battlefield. Ms. Behar, you've sat at the intersection of entertainment and politics for decades. Is the media still a bridge, or has it become a blade? Joy Behar chuckled first. It wasn't casual, it was defensive. I've said this on The View, and I'll say it here, truth needs a platform. And if conservatives feel attacked, maybe it's because the facts don't flatter them. She leaned back, lips pursed, daring someone to challenge her. Karoline didn't move. AOC jumped in. We don't need to pretend the media's neutral. Fox News exists. Right-wing podcasts push narratives daily. If we clap back, it's because silence costs lives. Vanessa turned to Karoline. Your response, Karoline's tone was quieter now, but firmer. I agree that silence can cost lives, but so can distortion. She adjusted her mic. I've watched elected officials use media to amplify their pain-valid pain and turn it into political performance, not advocacy, not reform, just attention. Joy interrupted, voice rising. You're calling people's trauma performance? I'm calling your packaging of it performance, Karoline replied evenly. There's a difference between telling a story and starring in it. The crowd murmured. Several leaned forward. One person clapped, then stopped unsure. Vanessa nodded. So you believe the media, Karoline cut in precisely. I believe the media became a stage, and some of us came to govern. Others came to go viral. AOC shot back. That's rich coming from someone whose administration fed talking points to Fox every morning. Karoline turned slightly. We briefed media. We didn't manipulate them. You congresswoman broadcast live while vote tallies hang in limbo. That's not transparency. That's theater. The host gestured to Behar. Joy, does your show shape opinion or reflect it? Joy's smile turned thin. We do both. But at least we don't pretend to be neutral while silencing dissent. Karoline didn't blink. You call it dissent. I call it distortion. She reached under the table and pulled a tablet from a portfolio, calmly placing it before her. Tapped it once. A screen behind her flickered. A clip began playing. From an older episode of The View. Joy's voice played on screen. You know, some of these protesters need to be careful. If you scare the public enough, you start sounding like the people you say you're fighting. The room reacted audibly. Joy's eyes widened. That was taken out of... It was posted on your verified YouTube channel, Karoline said flatly. Captioned and hashtagged by your producers. You haven't deleted it. You just hope people forgot. AOC leaned in, whispering something Joy's mic barely caught. They're running the board. Joy looked stunned. Karoline turned to Vanessa. The media isn't just a mirror, it's an amplifier, and when fear gets louder than facts, people turn on each other. I won't pretend both sides do it equally. But I will say this. If we're all performers now, then at least I came prepared with a script of record not rage. There was no applause this time, just cameras, blinking red producers, nodding, and viewers tweeting quotes before the segment ended. AOC exhaled hard. Vanessa moved in. Let's bring this home. We've seen facts, we've heard frustration. But if the role of media is in question, who restores trust, who sets the standard? Karoline replied without hesitation. The public does. Not panels, not podcasts, and certainly not personalities. It's the voter at home who reads the headline and asks who actually did something. She stood not to leave but to punctuate. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here because I stayed in the room when it was hard, when it was hot, and while others live streamed chaos, I negotiated order. AOC didn't respond. Behar muttered something, but it wasn't picked up. Vanessa raised her final card. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight wasn't about slogans, it was about clarity. Thank you for watching Face Off. See you next week where truth once again takes the stage. The cameras cut, but the storm outside the frame had already begun. In the green room, Karoline sat quietly as an aide handed her a phone. It buzzed nonstop. The clip of Joy's quote had crossed 1.8 million views in under 30 minutes. Conservative pages were amplifying. Moderate voters were resharing it with no comment. Just one word unedited. In Queens AOC, staff began fielding media calls. Some outlets already questioned whether her media exposure had overstepped ethics lines. On Reddit, a neutral political thread voted Karoline's performance the most surgical political takedown of the year. She brought folders, they brought feelings. The divide was no longer just ideological, it was emotional. And for the first time, Karoline wasn't a press secretary anymore. She was a contender. Break was short. The storm was not. By the time Part 4 went live, 3 major news networks had already cut in with flash summaries of the debate. CNN called it a collision of confidence. Fox called it a turning point. MSNBC simply posted a headline, "Leavitt outmaneuvers Behar and AOC in viral exchange." But back inside the face-off studio, the temperature had dropped, not in tone, only in confidence. Vanessa Hart remained center stage, her cards reshuffled now with deliberate slowness. We've touched policy. We've discussed trust. But now we confront the aftermath. What happens after the debate ends? When public safety stabilizes, what remains is the hard work of reform, health, justice, the everyday issues, and the question who's doing that work. She turned first to AOC. Congresswoman, you've been a vocal champion of universal healthcare, climate reform, and police accountability. How do you measure progress when many communities feel left behind despite rhetoric? AOC nodded slowly. Her voice, still composed, tried to regain footing. Progress isn't always instant, but it's rooted in truth. I've authored bills, fought for climate jobs, supported community clinics in Queens. It's not about quick wins, it's about shifting systems. Karoline didn't interrupt. Not yet. Behar leaned in next. Let's not kid ourselves. This administration talks about reform but governs by rollback. Karoline knows the talking points, but when it comes to healthcare, police abuse, women's rights, what has she done that's not just defending the status quo? Vanessa shifted focus. Ms. Leavitt, your response. Karoline didn't speak immediately. Instead, she opened a leather binder, a small act. Intentional. I'm glad you asked, she began. She laid 3 documents on the table. This, she pointed, is the healthcare access expansion in South Dallas, spearheaded through a federal-state co-op under this administration. This one, a justice pilot program, restorative sentencing alternatives for low-level nonviolent offenders. And this A School Funding Act I co-wrote that passed committee review 3 months ago. She looked up, gaze direct. None of them made headlines. But they made a difference. Behar scoffed. You're talking about bureaucracy. People want change, not folders. Karoline's voice sharpened just slightly. And yet those folders are how change happens. She paused. Let it breathe. See, Joy, I'd rather hand a working mother in Dallas a healthcare voucher than hand my followers a trending soundbite. AOC exhaled hard. You really believe trickle-down tax cuts and vouchers replace structural investment? Karoline turned toward her. I believe the choice between medicine and meals is unacceptable. But while you hold rallies, we hold budget sessions. Reform isn't a protest sign, it's policy math. AOC's next words came faster. You're defending an administration that cuts Medicaid guts housing programs. Karoline cut in her tone, quieter but heavier. I'm defending the voters who call at 2 a.m. when their kid is shot and their local rep is on a podcast instead of a planning board. The audience froze. Vanessa leaned forward. You just accused a sitting congresswoman of negligence. I'm accusing politicians of trading presence for profile, Karoline replied. Queens deserves more than Instagram captions. So does Dallas. So does every zip code forgotten by soundbite governance. A long silence settled, then a few nods in the crowd. Vanessa didn't smile, but she knew what was happening. The power dynamic had turned, not by fire, but by accumulation. Quiet wins, unshakable calm, receipts. Karoline leaned back, now poised but pointed. I was a press secretary, yes, but you don't survive that podium without precision, and tonight precision matters more than passion. AOC looked down, then back up. Her voice came slower. You've been trained to win, I've been trained to fight. Karoline nodded once. And that's why I govern. And you trend. The host tapped her mic gently. Final question for all three. If the cameras turned off now, what would you still stand for? Behar replied, first sarcastic. The right to call BS when I see it. AOC followed. Justice, dignity, the promise that politics can serve people again. Karoline's answer was different. Truth without applause, work without spotlight, and the idea that sometimes reform doesn't need to be loud to be real. The lights dimmed again. AOC looked at her no longer with defiance, but curiosity. Behar shook her head. This country rewards performance. Don't kid yourself. Karoline glanced into the lens one last time. Then maybe we change the reward system. In the control room, a producer whispered, that line, that's the one. YouTube would clip it. TikTok would remix it. But the live audience didn't need post-production. They had seen it, felt it, known it. Karoline hadn't just survived Face Off. She was rewriting how the game was played. When the cameras cut, the reaction didn't. It only shifted platforms. Within minutes of the segment ending, Face Off had generated more online traffic than any episode in its history. The hashtag #Joy Face Off Leavitt surged past 1 million posts. But this wasn't cheerleading. It was scrutiny, raw, unfiltered, and national. In Queens, local radio host debated whether AOC had lost her footing against a conservative operative who came more prepared than expected. In Dallas, a neighborhood watch leader reposted Karoline's outcomes, not retweets quote with the caption, "Never thought I'd nod to the other side." But here we are. Backstage, the energy was fragmented. AOC paced phone-in-hand messages coming in from both allies and critics. Some urged her to hit back harder in post-show interviews. Others warned to stay quiet. Anything she said now could be repurposed, meme-ified, used against her. Behar, red-faced, muttered at producers. They ambushed me with that clip. Who tipped them off? Karoline sat alone in a corner of the green room rereading notes. Her team wasn't cheering. They were listening. Listening to the sound of a crowd that no longer booed on instinct. A crowd that had paused. And pausing in politics is often the gateway to shifting loyalty. Vanessa re-entered the studio mic still clipped, signaling that they were preparing the final round audience questions and last words. This was the moment where many politicians coast. But for Karoline, it was the most dangerous part. Because this wasn't a room she could dominate with documents. It was the space where character was tested. Back under the lights, the atmosphere had changed. Vanessa introduced the audience mic. A young black woman in her 20s stood up first. My name's Tanisha, Queen's lifelong. So, my grandma voted for AOC. My mom did too, but I'm scared now. Not just about crime, but about feeling invisible. Ms. Leavitt, why should people like me believe you actually care? AOC turned slightly visibly shaken. The woman's voice had bypassed politics and pierced something deeper. Karoline stood slowly. Because I didn't come here to be liked. I came because I listened. She took a breath. I grew up watching my mom juggle 3 jobs. I know what it's like to lose sleep over the rent. I can't change your history, but I'll fight like hell to protect your future, even if it makes me unpopular. Tanisha nodded once. Not approval, recognition. The second question came from an older man in a leather jacket, Vietnam veteran Queens native. I want health care, but I also want order. I don't feel either. What should I trust more, your words or your office? This time AOC responded, I've never stopped working. I walk those streets every month. I answer those letters myself. But reform takes time. If you only measure me by what I haven't done yet, you miss what I've started. Polite applause, but no crescendo. Then came the final question, sharp as a pin. Do you believe in America's promise or just your party's platform? It wasn't directed at anyone, but only Karoline stepped forward. I believe the promise is bigger than either party. but only one side right now is willing to be hated in order to fix what's broken. And sometimes being hated is the cost of doing the job right. That line wasn't dramatic. It was sincere and deadly effective. Vanessa, sensing the moment, moved to close the segment. One final word from each of you. No policy, just principle. What do you stand for when the slogans fall away? Behar replied quickly. Courage to mock power. AOC's voice was soft. Dignity even when no one's watching. Karoline looked straight into the camera. Accountability, even when it's inconvenient. The closing music played. Cameras rolled out. But on social media, the real conversation had just begun. Karoline's final quote was already pinned by political analysts. A CNN anchor posted that was the most disciplined live performance by a press secretary ever. MSNBC countered, clever doesn't equal compassionate. Fox News simply ran the Karoline Leavitt, the new architect of the right. Meanwhile, on Reddit, a user posted the full transcript of her closing words. It was titled, "She didn't yell, she didn't flinch, she showed up." At the airport later that night, Karoline stood in line for a coffee. No aides, no handlers, just a carry-on bag and a buzzed phone. A man in his 50s approached her awkwardly. "I'm a Democrat," he muttered. "But tonight you were solid. Don't let them soften you." She nodded, didn't smile, just replied they won't. The storm wasn't over. But for the first time, Karoline Leavitt had stepped beyond press briefings. She had entered the national bloodstream. And she hadn't bled once. The sun rose over Washington like it always did, indifferent, golden, and quiet. But in inboxes across the Capitol, things were anything but. By 7:12 a.m., Karoline Leavitt's closing remarks had been clipped, captioned, subtitled, and re-uploaded across 46 different YouTube channels. The most shared version bore the title, "The Calm Before the Flip." Karoline ends the debate without raising her voice. By 8:30, she was trending on Twitter, Facebook, Truth Social, and TikTok simultaneously. But this wasn't a political echo chamber. The views were bipartisan, even apolitical. At 9:01, Fox News host Laura Ingraham opened her show with the words, "Is Karoline Leavitt the post-Trump right calm?" Credentialed, lethal MSNBC's Morning Joe countered. "You can memorize data and still lack a soul. Don't be fooled by format." But somewhere in Dallas and Queens and the rural South and coastal suburbs, a different kind of comment was surfacing.